And welcome to the Oro-Oto-Cerebral Pathway channel. In embryology series today, we are going to talk about formation and fate of the notochord. To understand it better, it would be nice to go through the previous episode in which we spoke about gastrulation, in that the role of primitive streak. Now, the primitive streak consists of a primitive groove. Towards the cranial region, we have a primitive node, and a depression in the primitive node, the primitive pit. Cells in primitive node multiply, they invaginate through the primitive pit and pass cranially in the midline towards the precaudal plate in the space between ectoderm and endoderm. And when they reach the precaudal plate, extending from the cranial end of primitive streak all the way up to the precaudal plate, they form a solid cord-like structure, the notochordal process. Soon, a lumen appears and extends throughout the notochordal process. This lumen has extended from the primitive pit all the way throughout the length of the notochordal process, and now this notochordal process, which has assumed lumen, is now called as the notochordal canal. In relation to the notochordal plate and the canal, the precaudal plate lies cranial to it, that is, lies between the tip of the notochordal process and the buccopharyngeal membrane. And later, it is going to induce the formation of the forebrain. In fact, many authors believe that the precaudal plate is the one that will eventually get incorporated and form the buccopharyngeal membrane. Now, the cells in the floor of notochordal canal become intercalated with the cells of the endoderm. That is, they get mixed up with the cells of the endoderm. If you have to have the orientation of what is happening right now in the embryo, towards the cranial or dorsal side we have the amniotic cavity, towards the ventral side we have the yolk sac, in between them is our trilaminar embryo, and in this trilaminar embryo, exactly at the midline, we have this notochordal canal. The notochordal canal will have a roof which will be closer to the amniotic cavity, will have a floor which will be closer to the yolk sac. So it is this floor of the notochordal canal, the cells of the floor get mixed up with the cells of the endoderm, and that is a process of intercalation. Soon after intercalation, the floor of the notochordal canal breaks down, and the canal communicates with the yolk sac. It also communicates dorsally with the amniotic cavity through the primitive pit. And at this stage, the amniotic cavity and the yolk sac are in communication with each other through this narrow communication called the neurenteric canal. It is assumed that for the further changes, developmental changes that are supposed to happen in the embryo, some source of nutrition is necessary, and this neurenteric canal, which is there transiently, is going to do exactly that. Now, the walls of the canal, the neurenteric canal, flatten to form the notochordal plate. Beginning at the cranial end, the plate infolds to assume the shape of a tube again, and this tube formation extends towards the caudal end as well. Cells in the tube start proliferating, and as a result of this proliferation, the newly assumed tube, newly acquired or formed tube, gets converted into a solid rod of cells called the notochord. Some authors would also like to mention it as the definitive notochord. The notochord is gradually completely separated from the endoderm, and as a result, the neurenteric canal gets obliterated. So the transient communication that was established between the amniotic cavity and the yolk sac ceases to exist any further. The notochord elongates as the embryo enlarges. It lies in the midline, extending from buccopharyngeal membrane to the primitive node, as we've already noted. Its position is later occupied by the vertebral column. So what's going to happen to the notochord? Fate of the notochord. Well, it does not form the vertebral column by itself, but degenerates and disappears. Its remnants, though, form nucleus pulposus of the intervertebral disc, and cranially it also gives rise to the apical ligament of the dens. It's a ligament attached to the dens of the second cervical vertebra. So what functions are subserved by the notochord? Well, functions of the notochord are: the notochord induces the overlying ectoderm to form the neural plate, which later forms the central nervous system. It induces the formation of vertebral body of each of the vertebra. It forms nucleus pulposus of each intervertebral disc, and it provides some rigidity and stiffness to the embryo in early embryonic life, because the further events will include conversion of this flat embryonic germ disc into a cylindrical embryo that will require some folding, and this stiffness is necessary at the time of folding. Well, this is about notochord in brief. Happy learning.